Hey everybody, not to be alarmist, but it looks like Xena may be leaving Netflix at the end of the month.
But don't worry, because there are a few possibilities here. One is that Netflix will renegotiate with the distributor, and Xena will be in its proper place on Netflix in 2017.
And this is something that happens all the time with Netflix, where they're, just dragging their feet trying to renew contracts. This happened with the X-Files in the middle of the X-Files podcast, and they renewed it. So it's possible that it's not actually going to go away, but in the event that it does, there are other things that we can do.
Primarily, you can still stream the show on Hulu, where the rights are not expiring.
Or you can spend your month binging it right now on Netflix before it leaves, maybe.
Or just buy the DVDs, because it's worth it, and you know you love it.
Okay, and now enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of Xena Warrior Podcast. My name is Vera, and I'm joined by my two lovely co-hosts, Katie.
Hello.
And Livy.
Hi!
So this week we're doing episode 105, The Path Not Taken, and 106, The Reckoning. But before we get to those, we got a great message from Sarah on Facebook. She is a PhD student in classics, and it's to do with the previous episode, Cradle of Hope, and also a point about Xena bearing her armor from the pilot. So she writes, "Your discussion of Xena burying her weapons struck me, as the imagery closely parallels that of Greek hero Ajax, who commits one of the most famous suicides in the Greek world. Ajax shares many similarities with Xena, prize fighter with a dark side, etc., but most importantly, he states the following moments prior to killing himself. But I will go to the bathing place and the meadows by the shore, so that by purging my defilements I may escape the heavy anger of the goddess. Then I will find some isolated spot and bury the sword of mine, most hateful weapon, digging down in the earth where none can see. Let night and Hades keep it underground." This is from Sophocles.
Vera, that was a very nice dramatic reading.
I'm sorry, guys.
You have a future there.
That was hardly
I
dramatic.
really felt the despair.
You're lucky I got these words out, all right? You know I can't read, just like Xena.
She can read.
Well, okay, should we explain that comes from how Lucy wanted to play her as if she cannot read.
Right.
But then they were like, no.
Yeah,
So she can read. So Sarah continues and says, "We are led to believe that Ajax will bury his sword in the ground, as Xena does, but we learn in the next scene that rather he has buried his weapon in his chest. Based on this well-known image from antiquity, I think it was very deliberate choice on the part of the Xena team to reflect ancient suicide imagery. And of course, as you know, this association between burying weapons and suicidal missions also fits nicely with later episodes."
Shh, spoilers.
Uh-oh.
Well, I really love that point.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing.
I completely agree, yeah.
Yeah, I think the connection between burying a sword in the ground versus burying a sword in one's chest is very beautiful and poetic. And
especially this hated weapon of mine. I really like that.
yeah, it's a weapon that Hector gives him, I believe, from the Iliad. Hector gives him a present.
Uh-oh.
So it clearly is a very weighted
Yeah.
weapon. But I was going to say that the creation myth for humans, for the Greeks, was that Prometheus made them from dirt, from the earth. So to bury one's weapon in the earth is to bury it in your chest, because you are earth. So there does seem like a connection, a very direct connection between those two acts.
This will absolutely not be brought up in the episode Prometheus that is next week.
Oh, no.
Okay, so Sarah's second comment has to do with the Greek conception of women in relation to the Pandora myth, which, as you'll remember, we discussed last week with Cradle of Hope.
Yeah.
So, while discussing the unfortunately titled Cradle of Hope, you all mentioned the odd and domesticizing choice of having Pandora replace her box with a baby. Forgive my classical gender studies tirade, but Pandora's box, as we have come to call it, was not a box at all in ancient texts, but a jar known as the pithos. A pithos had a wide base and a narrow neck, so if you turn it upside down, it strongly resembles a uterus. Many scholars have suggested that through this image, Pandora, the first woman, gave birth to all the evils of our world through her womb jar.
Oh, of course.
That's a great phrase,
That
Sarah.
womb jar.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll spare you my rant on what this says about Greek misogyny. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
We would have loved to hear the rant, but we
I
understand.
will totally read that rant.
But suffice it to say that having Pandora replace her box with a baby on Xena Warrior Princess is a nice nod to classicists in the audience. I really love that. Again, another good point. The one thing that I wanted to say that also supports this idea that Xena was maybe aware of the misogyny that's underpinning these ideas about Pandora is just the fact that it's Pandora's matriarchal line. It's her mother and her grandmother who have kind of borne this curse of having to look after the box. No dudes around. Mm-hmm. So this idea of the cursed box being a woman's reproductive organs, definitely in Xena. The other thing I wanted to say about that, as you may remember from the episode, the one thing left in the box was hope. The box that is a womb full of hope.
Oh, okay.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I see where you're going.
Yeah. All right. I won't go there then because of spoilers, but
Yeah.
there's a thought for you.
Oh boy.
Yeah, so thank you, Sarah, so much for this wonderful insight. And we really want to encourage, if anybody has, other insights, please let us know. Hit us up on Facebook. And,
As
or
you'll
Twitter.
remember, part of our whole reason for being with this podcast is to encourage people all over the world to talk about Xena.
It's true.
And that isn't just the three of us, that's you too. So please speak up. We love to hear from you.
Yeah, so let's move on to our episodes of the week, which I thought were pretty solid.
Yeah, let's get to it.
So The Path Not Taken, that's the one where we meet Marcus,
Right.
Xena's former lover.
Yes.
What do we think of Marcus?
I liked his arms.
I liked his arms too.
Would you call them arms of the future? Like in the 90s, I feel like men weren't as buff as they are now, And he
What
had
about
some
Hercules?
arms. Well, Hercules had to kind of look pretty good, and I suppose Aeolus looks all right for his age too.
I feel like muscular arms have always been in.
Have they?
I don't think.
But now
we
they're
invented
extra.
Muscular
Aren't they
arms.
extra now?
Well, we invented paleo diets and
Paleo diets.
whatever else.
I think we've invented men kind of needing to look like the superhero men, like the Avenger men. Chris Evans sort of took it up,
men with arms as big as their heads.
That was Battlestar Galactica. What was his name?
Lee.
His arms were pretty huge. Okay, so anyway, Marcus's arms were pretty great.
He has a great voice, and I think a
Very
real
calming.
sense of inherent decency about him from the second you meet him, which I think is kind of an interesting choice because he's working for a really bad guy, and you meet this guy, and you're like, huh?
Yeah,
What's
he
this
was
nice man doing in a place like this?
Yes.
Did we say what this episode was?
Yeah, I said the title of it, but would you like to describe the plot?
I feel like, we should do a little
Go for the plot description.
discussion.
Or you
of
could
what
read
it
the TV guide summary.
I did write down the TV guide summary.
Go for it, go for it.
Yeah. So in this episode we have Xena faces ghosts from the past when she visits one of her old haunts and ingratiates herself with murderous former colleagues in order to locate a kidnapped princess who's being hidden.
Yeah, it starts with a Romeo and Juliet type of little picnic with a guy with a really fun face. He was very sweet.
He's very adorable.
Very
They
sweet
both
guy.
were.
Yeah.
They were pocket people.
Yeah, and they explained that their families would go to war, right? And this is a
For
bridging
unspecified
marriage.
reasons, all great feuds between families, we don't even find out what the disagreement is about. We just know that these two young lovers are from families who hate each other and would use any excuse to kill each other. But of course, neither of those families is really the villain of the episode. In fact, you meet neither of them, that you only hear them discussed. The real villain is the arms dealer,
Mezentius.
Mezentius, who is enabling this battle because he's a war profiteer. So I feel like that's actually a very sophisticated villain to have in this episode.
Yeah.
He's a man who's neither on one side or another, who seems to have no ideology other than capitalism.
Yeah, he wears furs.
He wears furs, as all capitalists do.
So the girl is kidnapped by
Kidnapped by
goons.
some guys who look like they're dressed up as special ops, straight up.
Yeah.
It's not even trying to look like ancient Greece. They're wearing black hoods and combat belts, which I thought was, again, an interesting choice because this guy is a war profiteer. So his dudes are like dressed like the military.
And the introduction of Xena and Gabrielle this episode is they walk into this town, and it seems a pretty violent town, right? Because immediately a guy flies out the
there's a
restaurant
bar
window.
Fight in progress.
Right, and Gabs is like, oh man, I'm hungry. This place has real good food.
She just doesn't seem to notice that there's a fight. She's so innocent that she's just like, la 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 la. And Xena is beating up dudes in this tavern, and around the tavern.
It started with a lot of comedy that
Very
slowly
light.
changes kind of throughout the episode, but yeah.
Well, the comedy aspect of the fight in the bar is the fact that all these guys are coming up and being real gross to Xena and or Gabrielle.
This bar seems like misogyny haven.
Yeah, they enter, and Gabrielle enters, and the first thing is like a whistle.
Yeah, wolf whistle.
Wolf howl. She's oblivious, of course, and dudes are coming up to Xena and just like touching her, and then she just beats them up. And Gabrielle does not notice.
And this is all silent, which is...
Yeah. And it's funny.
It's just
played
this
for
like
laughs.
deadpan comedy that's just going on. Yeah.
She does the fire breathing in this one, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's like 2 in a row because she did it last.
It was
introduced.
We've had fights in bars now, 2 weeks in a row.
Yes, that's right. And so they get a table, and Gab's like, "Wow, we get a table always." Ha ha ha. She doesn't understand why, because Xena beats everybody up, and then Xena sits awesomely.
Yes. Yeah, we should always point out awesome sitting.
Yeah.
Because Xena does a lot of it, and it's always amazing.
Description of this particular awesome sitting?
Just puts both or one leg right up on the table and just slouches back.
She makes the space her own. She takes up as much of it as possible in a way you could describe as masculine, typical masculine.
Yes, hashtag good sitting. To the point where a dude comes up behind her and goes, "Nice legs," and then she has to literally kick him in the face.
Her foot just literally goes 90 degrees straight up and kicks him in the face.
Like an action figure.
It is not physically possible, but Xena does it.
She's great because she has a zero tolerance policy for this, to the point where they don't even get close, really.
No. And they're all drunk too, and it's just it's funny.
Yeah. It's great.
And I think it's especially striking then that later in the episode she walks into a different bar, which is also full of misogyny. And even though at that point in the story she's supposed to be pretending to be a bad guy, she still beats them up. This clearly is her way of dealing with kind of, slights against her, is just to find ways of punching people, which is great. Great way of dealing with it. Go Xena.
The nice little dude from the teaser comes up and wants to hire them, and in a great moment where Gabrielle's like, "Hey, mister," and Xena's like, "That's not the kind of hiring he means."
But then Gabrielle gets really excited about
money.
Which brings us to one of my favorite questions of all time in the Xena Warrior Princess universe, where we see someone, I think for the first time, coming up and being like, "I would like to hire you for a service. Here's money that I will pay you." And we have Xena saying, "I don't work for nations or for money or for whatever the whole line was." How do they fucking get any money ever?
Yeah.
It's such a mystery to me.
Where do they get the dinars?
Where?
I think they're socialists. I think.
I mean, we've talked about this.
Yeah,
they sleep outside usually. They fish and they get their own food.
So they don't need a lot.
But sometimes they do go to places and get drinks and things and food. And sometimes they do stay in hotels.
They get new outfits sometimes. And
they shop.
They don't make them. We've never seen them sew.
Yeah. Wait, no, we do.
We do see them sew?
I think they're entirely self-sufficient. I think they're not in the capitalist system.
We literally see them sometimes sleep in a hotel.
Yeah, they do. They do go to taverns sometimes.
Well, presumably they depend on people's charity. Yeah. Eventually Xena has such a reputation that maybe some kindly villagers give them food and give them shelter. Yeah. But they're almost like itinerant beggars / warrior princesses.
Anyway,
Agrenon hires Xena and Gabrielle to go find his kidnapped love, who he seems to already know is in neither family, that she has been kidnapped by the arms dealer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so this requires Xena to go undercover with some, because she knows this guy Mezentius, right?
She seems to know of him or to have met him before. It's a little unclear.
So she has to go undercover and kind of revisit some characters sort of from her past. Mm-hmm. To which point Gabrielle was like actually worried. She was like, I don't want you to, slip back in there.
It's the alcoholic going into a bar.
Yes. So,
which I think is explored a lot, obviously, throughout Xena, and especially in these earlier episodes when a lot of them are explicitly referencing her past. But for the 2 episodes that we're talking about in this podcast, I think temptation to go back to that lifestyle is a huge part of both episodes.
Absolutely. It's the main theme, I think. Mm.
I also think it's interesting in light of something we actually talked about for the previous episode, the Pandora episode, where we kind of noted that in one scene, Xena seemed to be kind of playing up her past, her mercenary history, as a way of kind of getting what she wanted. So I feel like this is sort of been a movement the character is on in kind of wanting to use her past in a productive way. So she kind of gets an opportunity here that I feel like she might have been seeking out. A way to kind of square who she was before with who she is now and like make that darkness work for her productively.
They mention the previous episode, the Cradle of Hope, very much in this one, as if like it was intentional for
and
these
the
two.
Pilot.
Yes.
I would say this episode, more than any we've seen so far, has pretty strong continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it doesn't just sort of vaguely hand wave at the first episode or the Pandora episode. It calls out events in them quite specifically and in detail, and they really inform the action here.
Let's talk about Xena's entrance into the baddie
Thieves'
bars.
Den or whatever.
What was it?
There's like Thieves' Den.
Yes. The hangout, which had women. I thought it was interesting.
Oh, I didn't notice the women.
Well, they were like,
it seemed like such a macho place.
There was a female presence, let's just say. Yeah. Ladies need to get paid too. What do we think about that? She enters, and there's some, people have heard rumblings about her.
Yeah, and she just dismisses it. She's like, how can you believe that?
Yeah, well, she twists it to say, I'm doing this as part of an act. Once you get people's trust, then demonstrates in flipping the guy over. Once you get people's trust, then you can do whatever.
Well, let's just clarify. They heard the rumblings that she maybe isn't the badass, former warrior princess.
Right, exactly.
She's doing stuff for good now.
Right. But then she says that it's all an act.
Yeah, and she flips the guy, and this is where we get ADR of the week.
Oh, yes.
Where ADR man goes, that's our Xena.
But yeah, I love that she sort of can play them off so easily. As a viewer, you can't help but be a little disturbed by that Xena can slip so easily back into who she was. And you almost don't even notice. I think this persona that she adopts in the bar isn't that far removed from the Xena we've seen. I mean, even in the fact that, she beats up a guy for kind of being an asshole, much as she just beat up a ton of people for being assholes. Yeah. So what is the difference between Xena then and Xena now? We should be a little worried.
And then, of course, we have literal introduction of Xena and Marcus.
Marcus's first line, which is...
The warlords say that they heard she went after Draco, right? This is the callback to the pilot. And she said, well, I went after Draco because he went after my mother. And then Marcus comes in and he's like, I got something to say about your mother. Yo, mama's so bad. Yeah.
Nobody disses Cyrene.
I know, yeah.
How dare you?
Neither does Marcus, because it's one of those moments where you think they're antagonists, but really, no, they're really good friends.
Yeah, and this is what I mean about Marcus's inherent decency, because I feel like he's immensely likable in this first moment. The fact that he's introduced to us by being like, how is your mother, Xena? You're like, I like you. You can stay. You're the boyfriend of the week, and hence we are kind of annoyed that you exist, but you can stay.
Yeah, so it's another one of those episodes where Xena's separated from Gabrielle, basically a lot.
Episode.
I mean, Gabrielle's side plot is pretty much side plot big time this time.
She's hanging out with, what's his name?
Agrenon.
Yeah, Aragorn.
I was going to say, no, yeah. Agrenon.
Yeah. Marcus, of course, works for Mezentius, the baddie.
Yeah, it's a little unclear what Marcus's role is in Mezentius's organization, but he works for him, and what I like about this arrangement is that Marcus's as we've said, sort of seems like kind of a nice, reasonable person who's working for this horrible monster rapist man and is just sort of okay with it. He's like, yeah, I do good things. I steal from this man on the down low. It's a good arrangement, which I think is, very true to the reality of a situation like that, where you can have like an evil man, but a lot of the people who work for him are kind of nice people who don't really see the contradiction.
Myzantius kept alluding a lot throughout the episode that he was gonna, have the princess brought to his bedchamber a lot, like multiple times.
Very like casual grossness.
Yeah, very like just,
Yeah. This episode I felt had a lot of that. Just like a lot of misogyny, a lot of rape threat, and it's written by a woman. Which,
Great.
Again, interesting.
I think that's probably, you might look at it like that's her female perspective. Like this would be happening to these women, and they go into these bars.
When male writers tackle Xena, it's much more of a fantasy in which these issues either aren't important or don't really exist.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that when a woman writes the show, both are prominent.
Yeah, and to the point where Xena then at a certain point kind of has to come up with a reason for the guy's rape threat to stop for the princess, which is legitimate about, how she would lose half her worth or like ransom if he did it. And he loves money, so he stops.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's interesting that, the way she finds to kind of deal with that situation is to reduce her to like a piece of capital. The princess is something of value, and you can't take away that value by rape. Again, like Xena is working in the capitalist system, and of course she has to use these capitalist rationalizations.
I mean, she came upon these things, I feel like, in future episodes that sort of dealt with her past, and also future episodes in general. There's some times where they kind of deal with, like, the Gurkhan episode in season 6, and who maybe...
That this is something evil people do, is that they reduce human life to capital, to being worth money. That maybe is the defining principle, at least in this episode, for what makes a good man good and what makes a bad man bad. Self-interest. If you privilege yourself over others, you're a bad guy.
So let's talk about Xena's weakness in this episode that I think Marcus...
Besides arms?
It's part of it. Marcus knows exactly how to deal with Xena, and it is through hot tubs.
Oh, yeah.
He knows that's her weakness, I think. He introduces the hot springs that exist in this area, and he very much tempts her, I think, with it. And I guess that's the same hot tub as from Hercules. We've previously seen literally that one where she seduced Aeolus.
Ah.
Yeah, which is interesting because that was Xena using her wiles to kind of distract someone. And here she's doing much the same. Mm-hmm. Marcus is tempting her, but really she's tempting Marcus.
Yeah.
She's trying to get Marcus to help her in her scheme against Myzantius. So Xena and wiles, OTP.
She has them, man. But I thought they had pretty great chemistry.
I did too.
Yeah. I was really into Marcus as a character.
I think especially that scene where Marcus tells her about his own kind of brush with redemption, which is an
That's important. Let's talk about this.
Affecting scene.
Let's talk about this. Go ahead. You brought it up.
Okay, so he tells her about this time when his army slaughtered an innocent, and not just an innocent boy whose grandfather, I think, is pleading for his life, which to me is very reminiscent of Gabrielle wanting to sacrifice herself for her town. You know, the thing that gets Marcus's sympathy isn't just an innocent, but a person selflessly pleading.
But the boy was an invalid, I believe, as well.
Right, he's an invalid. Right, he's a very, very vulnerable person. Yeah.
And the goon, I mean, like the goon,
and
his dude who works for him is like, oh, okay, great, and then he beheads him. Right, that's what happens. What it was.
Yeah, they make this old man makes a plea to the goon, and the goon responds by beheading the person the old man is trying to protect.
Right.
So it's obviously just act of total cruelty and inhumanity.
So Marcus then, that was his like rock bottom, I suppose.
Yeah.
So he left, right? But then he said that it didn't stick.
Yeah, he said he couldn't cut it. He couldn't cut it out in the world as a regular person. I wonder what that means.
During his speech there, too, when he's talking about this boy, what he's thinking of is actually Xena and how she would never kill anyone who was innocent or defenseless. And that is kind of what propelled him to kind of make this decision to try and leave like his
he says he always respected her for that policy in her army. And again, this I think speaks to something that's important about these characters, which that, you know, it's not like they suddenly become good. They always have this impulse, and it's a matter of them choosing to act on it, which Marcus does in this moment, but apparently, you know, he takes it back later.
He calls back to kind of the Xena we saw in Hercules, the one who refused to, you know, kill women and children and save the baby and everything like that. But I wanted to talk about how these early episodes obviously deal a lot with this and trying to drop being a warlord and everything. So I thought it was interesting how the first episode, which, you know, was called out with Draco and his speech about
Sins of the past,
and how Draco mentioned how he tried to go back home once and his dad almost beat him with...
I actually thought Marcus was about to say that. He was like, I tried to do it once, and, you know, I tried to go home, and I was like, did somebody beat you with a blacksmith hammer? Is this what happens to anyone in the Xenaverse who tries to go straight?
Well, I thought it was interesting that the show so far in various episodes covered warlords in certain capacities. So the first episode with Draco and this story covered it, you know, like in a familial manner, whether the parents are disappointed in the child who goes to live this lifestyle and how they react. The second episode dealt with warlords as a business, like a father-son business.
Yeah.
And then this one, I feel like, deals with warlords as an institution almost.
Yes.
And how if they get out, the transition is a problem, and there's so much recidivism that could happen.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, you get the sense that when he says he couldn't cut it, it's exactly
recidivism.
That he's someone who just cannot live on the outside.
Yeah,
he doesn't know how to fend for himself if he's not, I guess, presumably stealing and threatening people.
It is pretty great. And I mean, Xena really tries to convince him, though. Towards the end, they have that really great scene.
Yeah, and I think it speaks well of Marcus that he can perceive that there's been a change in Xena. He isn't entirely deceived by her act. He knows that something has changed in her, that she has embraced some new way of living. And he has that beautiful line to her, which Vera, I believe you wrote it down.
Oh, I wrote down a bunch of quotes because there was some good ones.
Well, he had said to her that, you know, in her quote unquote evil Xena ways, that she had always felt like she had something to prove, or was always acting like she had something to prove. And in this version of Xena that he's seeing now, he sees someone who has found some kind of answer, and then he says that he hasn't even found the question yet.
It almost feels like a religious thing, Xena finding an answer when Marcus doesn't even know what question to ask.
But it was like, that's a pretty great pickup line, because then there's kissing after that.
There is.
Xena feels seen. Xena feels understood, which, I mean, obviously that's...
Well, this is also a thing that she's been, you know, keeping private. This is like a personal thing for her, and especially like in this room, you know, well, in this area with all the baddies, like she's under a pretense. So this is like an honest moment, like a real moment. So of course there's kissing after that.
Which is sad, because then later Marcus will feel that this was the moment when he was manipulated, when in fact it's very sincere.
Maybe Marcus never found his Gabrielle.
That's right.
He definitely didn't.
Can we talk about the cuts between the kissing and Gabrielle?
Oh, those are some wonderful parallel editing, question mark.
So good.
Incredible. Oh my gosh. So they start kissing, and then there's like a hard cut to Gabrielle and Agrenon.
Change your name.
Agrabah.
That's my fault.
Yeah.
I ruined it.
So they're like in the stocks, and it's like back to being comedy, you know, comedy fun times for these two. They're on their own weird quest.
They're on their own weird quest, but one thing that I thought did kind of feed into the larger plot of the episode is that in their larger quest, Gabrielle and Agrenon are going to his bride's father to try to convince him that this is all just a terrible misunderstanding. Gabrielle has this very naive idea that rather than waging a war, you can just go and explain yourself. And she has this silly line while she's in the stocks being like, you know, war is just a terrible misunderstanding. Like, no one talks to each other. Which I think is actually a really interesting contrast, that the comedy plot is with this character who has this very naive idea of how people work, you know, and this very idealistic idea. And meanwhile, you're cutting between that and Xena and Marcus, who have seen some shit and, you know, have a much more disillusioned view of things. So in that way, you know, it kind of works. The fact that the comedy subplot is actually full of people who see the world in a very different way from Xena.
Yeah. And then it comes back to the kissing.
And then we're back to the kissing.
It's getting real hot and heavy in there, but Xena, like,
good. They have good
Xena
chemistry.
stops it. Yeah.
This is 2 good episodes of Xena having good chemistry
Yeah.
with boyfriends.
Well, I feel like these, I mean, Marcus is somebody from her past, so you give it a pass. You know, it's not like a boyfriend of the week that is just... So
right, he's got established history.
Her boyfriends of the week are either people from her past, so you buy it and it's legit, or they're like shoehorned in dudes that you're like, she would not be into you right now, dude. Like, because the script told you to, then yes. What's going on now? She has to go find the girl, right?
The girl has been stowed in the hot tub room.
Oh, I really want to talk about this. I thought this was so interesting because a future episode, which will deal with Xena's flashback.
No spoilers.
No, but it's just interesting to keep it in mind that this hot tub scene and the way that it's structured will be revisited in these episodes called The Debt in season 3.
Yeah,
I think.
there is I don't know if it's an intentional callback.
It's not. Probably not.
It's sort of like a symphony.
But it's just so similar. Xena is doing this trick right now with this in this hot tub where the girl's in it, and Mezentius is like, you know, there. So she's distracting him with her legs, guys. Her legs are important in this episode. Important. Nice legs.
Yeah, the scene is full of a lot of suspense.
And suspenders. So
you know, that Jana is in the tub. So obviously, like, Mezentius cannot get in that tub. But meanwhile, Xena is sort of tempting him to get into the tub.
She's really
given
him some ideas.
I think it's great that the two kind of tensions in the scene are competing against each other. She has to try to seduce him so he's not suspicious, but also they can't end up in the tub.
It's pretty great. It's pretty great. But I think it's just so, to me, it was so striking that it was the trick that another character plays in these future episodes that are actually set in Xena's past. So like she knows to do this because it happened to her.
We have to make a mental note to talk about this when we get to season 3, but I think it's a great example of the internal consistency of the entire show.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jinx.
And one more thing about that is that I love how she's wearing this silky, sexy robe, but underneath it, she's wearing her armor
and you
still.
can see it kind of.
She's a little bulkier than a naked woman in a silk robe really should be.
What happens next? Should we talk about...
At this point, I think we kind of are reaching the climax. Marcus confronts her. Well, Marcus is told the plot of the previous episode. I thought that was a funny way for Marcus's eyes to be opened about the reality of what Xena's doing. Somebody comes up to him in the thieves' den and is just like, here's a screener copy of Xena episode 4. Enjoy.
She did not kidnap that baby.
She throws it up in the air, but
baby.
She saved it. Yeah.
I have never seen someone so up in arms about a woman saving a baby. And isn't it funny that it's saving a baby, which is exactly what Xena originally did that so annoyed her own men and made them mutiny. So apparently all of Xena's friends from the old days hate saving babies.
Yeah, geez.
It's the worst, man. It's the worst. So he gets really pissed about that.
Yeah, he feels that he's been manipulated.
Yeah.
And he confronts her in, again, another very tense scene, I thought. Xena is trying to spirit Jana out of town by hiding her in a box of weapons.
Yeah.
And Marcus walks into the scene and, being a really smart character, knows immediately what Xena's up to, takes out a bow and arrow, and threatens to shoot.
Yeah, he introduces these new bow and arrows that's like, you know, Chekhov's bow and arrow, which will later be used.
That's how it works when you have a super bow and arrow, and here it punches a hole the size of a fist in a person, which does not sound like physically possible, but these are some super arrows.
Yeah. And this is where Xena really tries to kind of convert him to the good, to the good side, with her line that you do one good deed for no other reason than you know it's right. That's the first step.
It sounds like a 12-step program, doesn't it?
It's interesting that she says it's so simple.
Yes.
But it's not. This is kind of the hardest thing she's ever done in her life, but she's trying to convince this guy that it's easy.
Yeah, you have to make it sound little simple.
Was her first step giving that little boy food?
Maybe. Well, no, she was already, but...
Her first step was saving the baby.
That's right.
A selfless act. And again, like in an episode where kind of the villains are capitalists, I think it's interesting that the contrast is, doing something for no reason, for no monetary gain. Yeah, for no profit, which is a word that you hear a lot in this episode. Oh, yeah. Where's the profit in saving a baby? There is none. It's something you do because it's right.
Yeah, so the big climax of the episode is, of course, Mycentius comes in and he is a butt about everything.
He is a butt.
Yeah. I mean, there's like a fight ensues and the girl is like out of the box and Mycentius is going to shoot her and Marcus steps in front of the arrow and that's like his first step, literally.
Yeah. And last.
I mean,
I know, he doesn't get to even do the 12-step program. He stops at step 1.
His first simple step was really a big one.
Yeah. He didn't have to do that.
He did something that even Xena can't do yet, which is sacrifice.
Well, that's the thing. She was really annoyed at him because, number one, we know Xena can catch arrows. So she was like, I could have saved her, Marcus. Well, she literally said that.
And he says, I know.
Yeah.
He does it even though he knows he doesn't have to.
What was the staging of it, though? Like, would she have, been able to jump and catch it?
She would have done her war cry, jumped 20 feet into the air.
No, I don't doubt it. I'm just remembering. I'm just trying to remember how it was set up.
Yeah, Marcus is on a balcony, and I think Xena's on the floor.
Do you think this was his moment?
She could have done it,
like, from the first episode where we talked about whether her bearing her armor was like a suicidal point in her life? Do you think this was his?
I think it was. Yeah, this is Marcus burying his armor. This is sort of burying himself and kind of accepting what comes. I mean, in his case, it's something very tragic. He dies, but
So these are people who just literally can't imagine living outside of the institution. Like he can't.
I wonder if Marcus would have taken that step if he hadn't already had his kind of thwarted brush with redemption.
Yeah.
If he hadn't tried it once and failed, would this second time be as suicidal as it is?
Yeah, it's just really, it's really sad because he has Xena literally right in front of him as living proof that it can be done or it gets better,
Yeah.
So it is a bummer that he actually
It definitely
kills himself.
adds to the tragedy of the scene because what does it mean for Xena? It's pretty grim all in all. So as Katie has already said, the tone of this episode has
drastically
changed.
Drastically. And it ends, of course, with her chakraming Mycentius in a moment of intense
rage.
Yeah.
I can only imagine vengeance.
Yeah.
She just slits Mycentius's throat with the chakram, which is not a way we've seen the chakram used on Xena.
Certainly not on Xena.
And just that it is so violent at this point in the show. It's 6 episodes in. It's not as gritty or as violent as it gets later. So it was kind of shocking. I did not expect that. Obviously I've already seen it, but I didn't expect that to happen so early in the run of the show, that it would be like that shockingly violent.
There was a little trivia kind of thing about how good Xena, since episode 1, has now killed 16 people.
Oh my gosh.
That's her body count is 16.
I had been keeping track. She has killed someone on screen.
Yeah.
Quite shockingly in every episode since the first. I think in the
It
first,
shouldn't have been a surprise.
In the first, it's more implied. She kind of hits people, and you're not sure who's getting killed and who's like fine. but since the second episode, she has murdered someone, like a named character, and I think that's
certainly like the baddies. She's been like legit killing.
She murdered the warlord in episode 2. In episode 3, she murdered the head mystic in episode
4. She killed that
the advisor to the king.
Yeah.
And here, episode 5, she kills Myzantius. So, I mean...
This one's the most violent yet,
This one was very violent.
And it was personal.
She kills him in anger. It's not really a righteous killing, which the episode doesn't precisely address. I mean, again, if we're sort of worried about the state of Xena's redemptive path, this is evidence that, I mean, she still has a lot to learn herself.
Yeah, well, I think maybe that's why the next episode sort of takes it a step further.
Yeah.
And deals with some of these repercussions, maybe.
Yeah, definitely.
So why don't we move on to that?
Wait, before we move on, we should totally talk about at the very, very end when they're kind of holding the funeral for Marcus. Xena does her first funeral dirge singing, which, number one,
She
Lucy
does
Lawless...
this a lot.
I know.
A lot of people die on Xena.
This is going to come back. This is going to come back a lot. But it's just very important, I think, to note Lucy Lawless wrote the song and sang it because she has a beautiful, lovely voice and many skills.
Is it bad that it reminded me a little of like Jenna Maroney on 30 Rock?
Oh no, what? Why?
Xena just needs any excuse to sing.
Oh, that's funny.
She's like, great, another opportunity.
But yeah, it's so, I love that Xena can sing. It just is, she does have many skills.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just really beautiful.
And it recalls the song of the women of her village.
Right.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think all the ladies of Amphipolis would know songs. Yeah, for sure. It's really great. Yeah. Okay, so should we move on then to The Reckoning?
Back to temptation. And
The Reckoning.
Yeah, that's right.
And
that's
really a lot of temptation.
Oh yeah.
So many kinds of temptation.
And this is probably a very important episode in the world of Xena Warrior Princess because we're introduced for the first time to Ares, god of war.
Yeah, he's been mentioned previously in every episode, but this is the first time we see him.
Yes.
And his beard.
Ooh, and his
he will have
glued-on beard.
He will have many looks throughout the show, many facial hairs, evolution. This is pretty normal.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a goatee.
Short. Oh, man. Things are bad when a glued-on goatee is normal.
Well, for immediately he's a baddie because he not only has a goatee, it's glued on.
His hood for most of the episode obscures most of his face except the goatee.
Yeah, of course,
so he's just the worst person alive because he's literally like just a floating goatee.
This also starts on a fun comedy moment because in the grand tradition of Gabrielle walking next to Argo, she's complaining a lot because they've been walking for forever and says something like, I wish you said this an hour ago when I still had feet. Which I
meanwhile, Xena's just on the horse laughing.
I absolutely love the contentious relationship between Gabrielle and Argo that requires her to walk constantly for the hundreds and upon hundreds of miles that they constantly walk.
Yeah.
But she's in great shape.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Well, that's how she gets the abs.
We don't know that yet.
Everybody knows walking makes great abs.
Of course. It will later be proven when her clothing shifts dramatically.
Yeah.
Are they looking for the road in this one?
I think she's, or fording a river. Or there's some excuse that
the Gabrielle needs to leave, of course, and Xena has to ride on to discover a bunch of a small group of regular farmers being attacked by this hooded figure. So she fights them off. She fights the hooded figure off, of course.
Vera, you just made the same mistake as the villagers.
Oh no.
Xena must be up to no good.
Yeah, that's right. So it's she fights this dude. He keeps disappearing midair. It's weird. It's immediately weird.
He's such a little bitch. I know supposedly he's has a lot of battle prowess because he's literally the god of war. But I feel like all his moves are just disappearing.
Yeah.
I think that you get into a problem with gods and very powerful characters like that in storytelling because they can do so much. So his disappearing act is...
He's not a true warrior. He is the god of true warriors, but he cheats.
Yeah.
What happens is that she fights this guy, but he, of course, is a little bitch and uses all his tricks and kills 3 dudes, right? 3 villagers, and then one is alive, and after this hooded figure disappears, Xena tends his wounds. So she uses her sword as a neck splint. And
explains.
I love when you see Xena's field medical skills.
Yes, this is the first.
I love them so much, and I remember when I first saw this episode, I found it very unexpected that Xena had been given this character trait. I think there was a part of me that assumed it would end up going to Gabrielle, because we know that Gabrielle sort of wants to be involved, wants to be a warrior, but to me, field medicine feels like, a good way for a conscientious objector. To help, but, not hurt.
Yeah, and this nurturing as a role, like, Xena doesn't strike you as the person who is going to, like, be that way.
But at the same time, when you think about it,
makes
field
sense.
Medicine, of course a warrior would need to dress like a wound in the midst of battle with just a sword and a money bag.
Yeah. She uses the sword as an exploit, and then she takes the guy's money bag, dumps all the dinars out, and ties the strings to, I guess,
like
stop the bleeding. Tourniquet. Her hands, of course, get all the dude's bloods on it.
And the sword is bloody
that
from
was,
being
that was my sigh of crazy misunderstandings that are going to ensue from doing all of this, like, good work.
Yeah, Good Samaritan. Yeah, absolutely. The villagers come running because they hear this battle, and they see this lady there, and they assume she did it, of course, right? Because would you think this? I don't know.
I was surprised that nobody ever questioned, like, why is she sticking around?
Why is she helping
she
him?
Still there?
Yeah.
If she had killed all these men, she'd be running away already. But I guess the argument is that she had to stay to, like, individually pick up the dinars that had fallen in the dirt.
Yeah. But it is really
She's
crazy.
robbing the guy, someone says later.
Yeah. So they, surround her, and she doesn't even realize she has all the blood on her hands. I thought it was a really great shot of her kind of like
the camera
looking
pans
at it,
down,
and
or
she
she
sees. So the villagers with their literal pitchforks chase her off.
A mob
and one
with
rake.
pitchforks.
And one rake. They chase her off. You were like, when were rakes invented?
I just don't think that they had them. But I don't know anything about agricultural tools. So
in ancient Greek, vaguely ancient Greek times,
they have war profiteers, so I don't see why they wouldn't have rapes.
I don't care. I don't question it. They invent so much on this show.
It's
wonderful.
In a little while, Gabrielle's gonna invent forensic science.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's great.
So she's chased off, and that's when the credits start. That's the
I love that the reckoning comes up while you're looking at the pitchfork wielding mob chasing Xena. It's a really elegant way to have the title come up.
I thought the next scene was also really great, which is Xena finds Gabrielle. Oh man, what's Gabrielle up to, guys?
Well, she's by the stream.
Just really enjoying that stream too.
Yeah.
She's like, Xena, come over here. It's so nice.
She's washing up by the stream, and she's kind of stripped down in her shifts.
She looked like a pre-Raphaelite painting, I thought, in her white shift and her long hair, and she's in a stream. She's just like the picture of innocence.
Yeah.
And she's barefoot.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is where it's really great. Xena has no time for her shit. She picks her up, puts her on the back of Argo, and there's this great shot that I thought was really amazing of just her barefoot kind of like hanging on the side of Argo as they gallop away.
It's a great detail.
Yeah, it's a great little detail.
To me, that's Gabrielle quite visually being this innocent figure who needs protecting. Who's not really prepared for this world. Like, Xena is being chased by a mob wielding pitchforks, and meanwhile Gabrielle's like, hey, the water's warm. Come join me. So nice. Oh, did you get on the horse? No.
She does get to ride Argo a lot this episode.
She does, yeah.
Which is nice.
I mean, this Argo and Gabrielle's relationship is explored throughout season 1.
We'll track it as it goes.
Yes, absolutely.
Is she right? Does Argo hate her? Or is this all in her head?
Yeah, no, it's a thing that will be explored later on.
They're competing for Xena's love?
What do you think is the reality? They don't want people on a horse? Is that the reality of the thing for why Gabrielle...
Do you think?
Are they afraid of two women kind of like
I feel like just, no. For me, it's almost just awkward. It's awkward for two people to have a conversation on a horse. They can't look at each other.
Well, I don't know why they would be having conversations. It's literally like it's crazy that Gabrielle has to walk everywhere. It is kind of crazy.
I do feel bad for her feet, and I love that the beginning addressed it.
Yes.
And I think, it does speak to a kind of power differential that exists at this phase in the story. Like, Gabrielle can't defend herself. She's kind of just tagging along with her best friend Xena, who gets to ride a horse and carry a sword and be a badass, whereas Gabrielle is just sort of there.
It's just strange. I don't know. She doesn't get a horse of her own until season 6. So
They should build her like a little sidecar that can hang off Argo.
Didn't they explore maybe her riding a donkey for a while?
Oh no! Yeah, you're right. Donkey is the ancient world's equivalent of the sidecar.
It's pretty. It's. I don't know. She is afraid. I think of horses because they're too large. Because she's small. Remember, guys?
Yes,
she's a pocket person.
That was established.
So maybe that's kind of like their explanation. But it's still. Yeah, I liked seeing her on the horseback. It's pretty great.
Yeah. All right, so we should talk about the fact that the mob ends up laying a trap for Xena.
Yes.
And captures her in a, I thought, quite upsetting way. They grab Gabrielle.
Right.
They're threatening her.
Yeah, they use her as leverage in that situation to basically take Xena.
Can we talk about the line right before that where Gabrielle is really dubious that this townspeople, these farmers, would be doing something like this?
Right, or that they're any threat. She's not necessarily dubious that they might do this, but she's like, we don't have to worry about it, right?
Yeah, because they're farmers.
They're
like, why would they be doing this?
And nobody's afraid of farmers.
Yeah, and Xena has this great line where she says, I've seen what could happen to people whose loved ones get butchered. Their vision becomes bent and twisted. Then there's no telling what they'll do. And of course, she's talking about herself.
Of course.
She's also talking about a character we have yet to meet who is very significant to the Xenaverse.
Who?
What? She's talking about Callisto.
That's true. You're right. I mean, yes, you're very... Callisto is Xena Jr., so hence it's all a part of it.
Yeah.
But I couldn't help but think that, she's clearly talking about herself there specifically because that's all we know. She became this crazy warrior princess because, her brother was killed. She was just from a farm town and
she let her rage at injustice warp her thinking, just as these villagers do over the course of this episode.
Yeah. So she's captured. Yeah. Is this where they string her up or no?
Yeah.
There was a funny quote about the way that she was strung up. Because originally, I guess, she was strung up in the stocks that Gabrielle was in the previous episode.
Comedy stocks. Clearly the right choice for this very serious episode.
So the director, Mr. Charles Seabird, saw those and was like, guys, that's real ugly. I don't want to do that. Let's make it like a little bit sexier. Let's make it visually pleasing.
No, too sexy.
And so, they just put her kind of her arms in chains and just kind of like in the middle of the room.
And she's wearing a shift.
Yeah, she's in her shift, so it's nice. And it was really funny that they rigged it up before Lucy got in there. And when she walked in, Lucy walked in and she said, wow, that looks like sexual fetishism, and jumped right in there. Like, chain me up, boys, let's go.
Club Vandersex.
Oh, shit.
Save this moment for later when we talk about the documents.
Oh!
Well, yeah, there's a lot of S&M.
Yeah, this is the S&M episode.
Hanging over this. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Xena is a prisoner, and these villagers choose to sort of sexually humiliate her while she's in prison, which is really disgusting of them.
But would you, sexually humiliate?
Well, she's stripped to her underwear and chained up in this very...
I don't think this episode was as suggestive about that aspect as let's say the previous episode. There was never like, and then the guy wants is going to use this moment to
there's no rape threat, but there is just this
they do beat her up as she is chained up. So
and on whoosh.org they talked about the original script had that moment where she's being beaten later as being whipped, which would actually be a little more in your
Well, he
does swat her.
Read
with like a switch.
Yeah.
Okay, so
we'll get to that.
Let's talk about Ares.
Yes, this is Ares' first appearance now without his hood. You can see more than just the goatee.
So this is the craziest part.
Let's talk about this because I was like, what is happening? So their first introduction, it almost seems in the dialogue that at first it's like, have they never met before? What's
Yeah.
happening?
He says something like, I'm introducing myself.
Yeah,
Right. So
it's her former mentor and biggest fan.
I just think
That's
the dialogue
Aries.
is weird at the beginning because you get this impression that they've never met, but then he says, I am your mentor.
Yeah, but she
So-
says, I've never seen your face.
Yeah, so technically they've had this past relationship, but he may have never been in his particular form as Aries.
Or maybe he just had
and
like
or
a
always had
paper
that-
bag over his head.
I found that straight up shocking. I didn't
Yeah, I mean,
understand that.
obviously they just didn't
Yeah.
really know quite yet.
Sure,
and this,
but,
it'll
like,
evolve.
Yeah, so I guess she had some kind of, clearly relationship mentor thing going on, but didn't know what he looked like until now.
Doesn't it say a lot about gods, though, that, yeah, you can have a kind of worshipful relationship with them from a distance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But as soon as Xena decides not to worship Ares anymore, he's like, oh no, I have to go find this woman in person. I need to show her my face. We need to, actually talk now.
Well, that's the beauty of the Greek gods, because they can do that stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay,
Yes.
so
Oh, I'm
this
sorry, I
first
just left
scene,
my own note that just said, I have questions about their meeting. Yeah.
It's maybe a retcon later. They may kind of wallpaper over some of
Yeah.
these lines, but at the same time, it kind of works.
Right, at least that they do say that they did have a
Yeah, you
established
understand
past,
that sort of she had a relationship with Ares when she was still a warlord.
quote unquote, we were once a great match.
Yeah.
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 He tempts her this episode, right? So
He tempts her in several ways. This is the first.
the first way is by introducing a green screen. And
May I introduce you to a green screen? Oh, the technology! Oh, Ares!
It's incredible 1995 green screen technology that Ares tempts her with. He makes the dungeon into this beautiful room with a fireplace, all this fruit, and guess what, guys? A hot tub. He knows. He
Everyone
knows her.
knows.
He knows her weakness.
And don't forget about her sequins.
What?
Sexy sequin dress.
Oh,
pulls
yes.
out and you know what? That reminded me almost, it's impossible not to think of What's-His-Face from episode 2, who also gives Xena a dress.
Oh gosh, yeah. Darius.
And not only that, but you also have villagers who are like, "Don't wear your armor," much as these villagers strip Xena of her armor. So it's weird that this episode is echoing a different temptation episode of Xena's. She was tempted by domestic life in episode 2, and here she's tempted by its exact opposite.
Absolutely.
So sequin dress instead of dead mom dress.
Yeah, and he also tempts her with the documents on the table.
God, let's talk about
about the
line.
documents.
Oh
Let's
my
talk.
goodness.
Say the line. Say the full line.
Wasn't it might I show you these documents on the table?
Documents on the
In
table.
a really sexy voice.
Yeah.
Just, can I draw your attention to these
There
documents?
was just something very particular about it that was hilarious. Number one, as just a line in general, because it's documents are never interesting. These kind of are, though. We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But with the kind of overt overtones of the scene, it's very sexy. We've kind of talked
They're
about
in this
the-
hotel room, basically.
and so I was just you can't say the word documents and not think about 50 Shades of Grey.
If you'll
So
just sign the contract here.
this is
Yeah.
Aries and Xena's 50 Shades moment.
It's true. I mean, this episode is just, entirely undertones of S&M and everything. Literally, she brought it up herself. So
Yeah.
there you go.
So,
But
yeah.
the documents are kind of this deal that he wants to make with her to kind of get her to be with him, right?
much like 50 Shades.
Right. But they're kind of good
Yeah.
policy documents.
What
They're
policy?
about healthcare and
I
Social
wrote them down.
Security.
It's, that you taxed villagers only on their profits. It would be comfort for the elderly, the teaching of medicine. These are great
It's kind of
things.
like
pretty
policies
great, yeah.
that we need right now.
And sort of all in all, what he's saying
boy.
is, you'll wage war, but only against injustice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's tax the rich, Social Security, and healthcare.
Yeah.
Really.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
she'll be a benevolent dictator.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
That's a great idea, obviously.
I don't know.
There've never been any, like, bad versions of that.
She said I'm fighting for a better world, and then he goes, you were always fighting for a better world. You were going to conquer it and rule it, and that's like what he has always wanted for her.
I mean, the part of
And the two
this
of them
that
together.
to me
Yeah, of
is
course.
immediately unpersuasive is you have the god of war saying, don't you want to rule the world so that there's peace? I feel like the immediate question that invites is, and then what, God of War?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, obviously Ares wouldn't have a vested interest in that future. There is a catch here.
Of course. It's too good to be true anyway, so.
Yeah. And I think justifiably Xena isn't that persuaded by this first temptation.
Yeah. The crux of the scene is that he goes, you're going to need me, and when you do, call my name and I'll be there. And then he kind of like leaves. The green screen grows away.
Bye, green screen.
The townspeople, in a big spectacle, take her outside and they introduce what is it called? Like the horse dragging?
Yeah. Dragging, I think, is the term for
Yeah,
that
so
death,
it's
that
a horse
execution.
drags you behind itself on a rope. And that's honestly a thing that will appear on Xena multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah, that becomes equated with sort of dirty vengeance. Yeah, because it's kind of awful. It's an awful, torturous way to die. It's humiliating.
Obviously, this is like legit historically accurate, though, so it's pretty good that they're using that. And previously, we didn't talk about it, but Gabrielle was talking to the whole plot of this thing is that they're going to put Xena on trial.
Yeah,
for,
this is
for
a
the
legal
murder.
episode
Yeah,
of television.
This is their trial episode, guys.
Law and Order. Dun dun.
Yeah, that's right.
Or someone on the internet compared it to LA Law at the
Oh.
time, which would be
There you go, there you go.
timely.
Yeah, topical.
And this is peak early Gabrielle because this is her using her ability to like logic her way out of things and talk and be persuasive.
Right.
Except that it doesn't work.
Right,
in
well,
this
she was
case.
just lamenting in the previous episode that no one talks. Terrible misunderstanding.
Yes.
So here's her opportunity to address that, and it does not work.
And I think she learned something here, just about how justice as she sees it won't always prevail in the sense that, truth isn't always gonna save the day.
She says there's a difference between justice and the law. And clearly the law is fallible and easily manipulated, and justice is often not had, even within its bounds.
But sorry, we were talking
Well,
about...
that's like a little bit later.
We'll get
It's a
there.
little bit later.
Yeah, I
but
have
you're
lots to say
talking about the dragging.
The introduction is that she wants to be Xena's lawyer, right? And in this town, the town elder / judge of this
Benatar.
trial, what is his name?
Benatar?
His name
Pat.
is Benatar.
We're calling him Pat.
Pat Benatar
Not to
rules this
mention-
village.
Yeah, Pat Benatar is in charge of this village, and also one of the village people who testifies later is literally David Crosby. He's the guy in the hat. So just FYI.
Oh, hats. Let's just talk about... Okay, so I just need to make a point of anytime there's a funny hat on anything, and Xena has a lot of funny hats in this show, the hat becomes just the focal point of the scene. And it's
Now
just a
you're-
rule of funny hats.
So you're talking about the quote that Peter DeLuise, who directed lots of Stargate SG-1, said in a commentary one time, which is that if you have a funny hat, that is forever gonna rule the scene.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot have a funny hat.
You just can't focus on anything at all that's happening when there's a funny hat.
That's right. And early Xena certainly has a lot of them.
The guy in the funny hat in this episode is just he's in trouble because he has like a really stupid wig underneath the funny hat and a really
David Crosby.
stupid mustache.
That's David Crosby.
Yeah, David
That's what
Crosby.
and also, he looks just like David Crosby. That's his problem. Okay?
So we thought we loved this episode, but actually it's just dominated by David Crosby in a funny hat.
I think the early, costume choices in terms of villages and hats, it kind of transfers over from Hercules. That's the thing. Back to the episode. Gabrielle wants to be Xena's lawyer, but the guy's like, well, no outsider has ever been the lawyer, here. That's weird. But then he witnesses how the townspeople want to just skip this trial and just basically drag Xena around behind this horse, and he's like, oh, never mind, you can be the lawyer.
I think he's also impressed by Gabrielle.
Yeah, she's cute. Wouldn't you be impressed by her?
I mean, I am. I'm impressed with her every episode, but in this one in particular, the fact that she stands up to this mob who are, like on the point of basically lynching Xena.
Yeah, they're out for blood.
I think it's really important also to note the film aspect of this dragging scene. They don't actually do that. It's just a threat. But Ares appears and he expects Xena to call his name. So they do these massive, extreme close-ups of both of their faces.
That's very, I feel like, very early televisual emotion stuff. Like, you're in TV as this character medium where you get right up in people's faces. Like, this is very of the time, I feel like, but in a great way.
And it's very strategic. You don't have a lot of intense close-ups in Xena at this point, so that really does mean something. You understand.
And it will come back later at the end of this episode once we get there. I will call back to this. I thought it was really striking.
So at this point, Gabrielle invents forensics.
That's right. She Sherlock's the scene.
She understands how to read footprints.
You wish you made a cast of it, because that would have helped. Then Ares was a butt.
Oh, I see. So she doesn't actually invent forensics. she should have gone all the way here.
Yeah.
She should have set up a lab.
That's right.
This is once again playing into my I hate crazy misunderstandings thing, because really, like, she has the proof and Ares erases it.
She finds the footprint that there's two footprints, like a lady one and then like a big old dude footprint fighting each other in the original crime scene area.
It's kind of a magnificent allegory, because talk about a rigged system. Like, I mean, Gabrielle can literally find physical evidence and it doesn't mean anything. Like Ares is there to ensure that it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, he literally gets rid of it, and Pat Benatar is like, why did you drag me out to show me nothing? Because it's no longer there, because Ares is a butt. And
it was a great call by Gabrielle, and I think you can't help but feel like, at first you kind of laugh off her attempts to be Xena's advocate, but she's immediately has great instincts for exactly what areas to pursue.
Her literal physical evidence was erased. Now let's talk about the trial, and she comes up with a new technique.
An amazing argument. Yeah. She destroys the ear witnesses, which is a total classic lawyer move. You trick the ear witness. She, during questioning, sort of says, what did you hear? Did you hear swords? Oh, you did? Well, guess what? The villagers didn't have swords.
That's right.
So what you heard was Xena fighting this unidentified other warrior who killed the villagers. Yeah, it's super persuasive, but, rigged system, no one cares.
Yeah, is this where they bring in the one surviving guy?
Yeah.
So the surviving guy who she helped was really unhelpful, like, in an insane way.
He lost a lot of blood and probably was confused, so we don't want to blame the victim too much here.
I'm blaming him.
But you kind of, what's great about the storytelling kind of in that moment is you do expect, he's going to come in and he'll say exactly what you expect him to say. Oh, yeah, she was helping me. But that doesn't happen.
No.
Yeah, Ares doesn't even need to interfere. This is just pure human weakness. This guy interpreted what he saw and wanted to blame someone.
Yeah, so he obviously says the last thing he saw was this woman kind of over him. So hence everyone was like, she did it. So she's back in the cell, and this is where the guys come in and 50 Shades whip her, right? Not really. They beat her up.
But this was amazingly filmed.
Let's talk about this.
It was really disturbing. You lose the sense of being in the actual dungeon or jail, whatever you want to call it, because it's so dark. Mm-hmm. So you're just sort of seeing these close-ups of him, like, hitting her in the stomach and, like, seeing her react. And it feels really violent. It feels very...
And the audio kind of echoes and becomes quiet, and that's where you hear Ares comes and is talking to her as she's being beat up.
One thing I wanted to say, though, about that audio is he's telling Xena biographical information about the people who he thinks she killed, which is exactly like how she was tortured in Dreamworker by her victims, where they come and tell her the names of, their children.
Yes. This is where you see flashbacks to Hercules, right? Yeah. So this is, if you haven't watched Hercules, this is the first episode where you literally see her being the warrior princess.
I think they do it in the first one.
Yeah, you see it in the first episode of Xena.
Never mind, guys. Never mind.
Since then.
All right. If you skip that one by accident,
Yeah, but this is Ares' second temptation of Xena.
Yeah.
And what I found hysterical about this particular temptation, which is sort of less about the rational policy for the public good and more about, like, doesn't violence make you feel good inside,
Right.
is that he basically says to her, the power, the passion, the danger.
Oh my God.
Those are his, like, buzzwords that he uses to
Wow.
convince her. And I was like, wow. Does that mean that every week when I watch the Xena credits, Mr. Voice is trying to tempt me to a life of violence by going the power, the passion, the danger?
Interesting.
Oh,
Is this a bad time to talk about the Xena credits where I literally watching the entire show at the very end of it, or maybe even like starting to rewatch episodes once we were done, I noticed how in the credits she like chakrams the guys to death and then catches it like, yay!
yeah, that wasn't her, like evil Xena moment.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, it makes
but
sense.
the catch is
Yeah.
nice Xena. It's
Yeah.
not the evil one. It's just
Yeah.
really weird.
I mean, obviously,
But-
this is a product that they mostly had Hercules footage to work
Right.
with for
Exactly.
the Xena titles, but it is a little disturbing that actually the Xena titles are full of Xena murdering people
Yeah. It's a
in
little
her
strange.
warlord days.
It's a
But-
small segue.
Also,
yes.
in this Aries temptation scene, I feel like if you're gonna have OTP words as a tag on Tumblr or such like places, they are definitely going to be "I burn inside you."
Okay, let's
they
talk
not?
about the ship here.
Yeah.
So Aries and
This is
Xena
a big one. This is
a
really-
huge the other
Absolutely.
ship
No, absolutely,
on this
absolutely.
show. So this is like the birth of it, right?
Yes,
What did we think?
I like it.
Not with that goatee, girl.
Not with the goatee, but I like it.
Yeah, I mean, again, his facial hair is really problematic throughout the entire program.
In a
basically.
delightful way.
Problematic? Do we need to throw money in the jar for that?
I would call his kind of season 3 beard situation a money in the jar issue. Like it was really a deal. I would
Always
take this
delightful,
one over the glued on one over to the facial hair creation. Let's just say of season 3. They do have chemistry.
They have
I thought she
great
had
chemistry.
I thought she had chemistry with Marcus and with him.
I do too.
I
I
thought
do.
it was really great.
I want to take here's an aside, maybe perhaps, but this is where I just kind of want to point out that like I will always be here to defend as you would normally pronounce it, Xena as
The
being,
suspense.
yeah, as being bisexual.
I
Absolutely,
100%
100%.
agree. I 100% agree that this is definitely a bisexual woman. Like, for sure, her entire history with men is just very specific.
Yeah.
You cannot have her not have
Absolutely
the men.
not.
While later they will show her first lesbian experiences. Like, I honestly believe some of those episodes were her first female experiences. You cannot have
Yeah.
Xena without these men.
Yeah, no, and I love that, and
For sure.
I think it's fantastic. It's my favorite thing.
Yes. We will
That's
talk
my
about
side.
maybe Gabrielle's, like, men experiences later.
You could definitely make some intriguing observations about how, her attraction to men is equated with bloodlust and
Interesting.
murder
Yes.
and death, and her attraction to women is about redemption.
That's
and
absolutely
nurturing
true.
and
That's
hope.
amazing.
Absolutely
Yeah.
true, and we will absolutely talk about it. It's
Oh.
it's wonderful and it's very interesting.
But
Yes.
yeah, we're in this moment where Aries is trying to appeal to this part of Xena and, asks her to use her quote unquote supermortal strength to kind of get out of this situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in this moment, Xena embraces that part of herself
and
frees
hulks out.
Hulks out.
This
yeah.
is exactly what she does. She
Frees
literally
herself from her chains,
busts out of those chains.
beats the crap out of everyone in the room, and then unfortunately at this moment is when Gabrielle walks in, and Xena, being kind of in this state,
yeah.
just whacks her right in the face, and she kind of flies across the room.
Abuse, guys.
It's
Abuse.
abuse.
And I think
It's
this is the heart.
abuse.
Yeah, but this is also oh no. But this is the heart of the episode, really,
Yeah.
right here, because this is where we were talking about in the previous episode. Marcus never found his Gabrielle. Gabrielle, in this moment, brings Xena back to herself, which is kind of how it was written in the shooting script, really. Like, so she's kind of in her hulked out moment and seeing what she's done to her best friend. They say, like, only now does Xena vaguely recognize Gabrielle, the sight of whom will slowly bring her out of her madness.
Gabrielle's her anchor.
Yeah. Always.
Yes. And then in terms of acting moments, I believe in one of the coffee talks, Renee talked about how
With Lucy and Renee.
Yes.
Those are so good on the YouTube. Yes.
Yeah, check them out.
Yes.
Coffee
please do.
talk.
It's a wonderful
Hours of fun.
gift to us all. But so Lucy filmed, her part, and she didn't look at Renee or whatever, but for the reaction shot, Renee literally asked her to look at her so that you get that reaction of Gabrielle being just so completely hurt by this moment. You could see the little tear on her face.
So she wanted to look into Lucy's eyes.
She wanted to look into Lucy's eyes to react.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it worked, because I thought that reaction was pretty strong.
I mean, it does feel like a moment that just stops the whole episode in its tracks.
Yeah, and it stops
so
Xena in her
shocking.
tracks.
Yeah.
Quote unquote whoosh.com. I keep saying quote unquote, but whoosh.org in the commentary described it as the slug heard round the world. And it is, because, it brings her right back. And,
And this is sort of goes back to everything we've said about, sweet baby angel Gabrielle, who's just so innocent and so cute, and often just, in comedy subplots, because you want to protect her from the darkness of the rest of the show. And here she is, just physically confronted with Xena's darkness. And it's
darkness and injustice in a way that she hasn't really understood it before, and reacts against it in this way where now this happens to her, and she's clearly very hurt by it.
He says, what you did wasn't you.
Yeah.
Do we agree? I think there is maybe a lingering question mark about whether Gabrielle's right. But, I mean, I'm glad that Gabrielle feels that way. And I think in some ways it is consistent with sweet baby angel Gabrielle that she's able to look at this moment and be like, well, that wasn't really Xena. Xena doesn't really think or believe any of that. I can dismiss this and forget it. Yeah. That might not be true of the character moving forward, though.
But then, of course, Xena was trying to escape, and this moment brings back all of that guilt that she feels, to the point where she stays in the jail when she could have escaped because of how she
starts helping,
and she starts going I didn't do this one thing that I'm on trial for, but I've done so many things that you might as well just do whatever to me.
Which is sort of Xena's perspective on justice, which is that on some level she feels she hasn't paid for her crimes.
Right.
And I think in some ways she's always seeking out some form of...
Her wanting to be on trial for literally, if she comes in an episode and discovers that maybe a past issue has come up, she's like, yep, great, put me on trial.
Yeah.
I deserve it. And that happens a lot. And it's really significant, especially in the series finale.
Yeah, you could point back to this episode and this particular moment where she accidentally hurts Gabrielle as the moment where she realizes, oh, I should be punished by someone. And it almost doesn't matter whether it's an appropriate punishment, because for me, any punishment is appropriate, which is an awful thing for her to think. But we understand how she comes to that conclusion. I also love that she does use her field medicine again then.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, put Band-Aids on all the goons who she's beaten up.
So Ares gives her this line. Does he appear to her again?
She deliberately seeks him out a third time.
Yes, that's right. And
it's sort of Xena's temptation of Ares, but he doesn't know that.
Yeah,
right.
this is a good many skills scenario where she's kind of devising a plot against him, really.
But I liked how he said to her, "You're attracted to danger." I thought that was really...
The power, the passion, the danger. That's where I'm getting it from.
You're right. But I mean, that also, to me, that was kind of her taste in men, which later on in some episode and way later...
She likes the bad boys.
Yeah, it's mentioned about her taste in men.
Yeah, she likes battle. She likes bad boys. Yeah.
What's the final... how does she win against Ares in this episode? She tricks him, basically.
She fronts like she's willing to negotiate.
Yeah.
And she comes up with some conditions that basically are, once I've been found guilty, I can summon any warrior I want to avenge me against these stupid villagers for putting me on trial and putting me in this position. So that's kind of the agreement she has with Ares. He thinks she's going to summon the world's greatest warriors to just...
Achilles, Agamemnon, and Hector, who are long dead, quote unquote, even though even though the Trojan War is still happening.
We'll see.
Well, the Trojan War went on for a really long time.
But these guys aren't dead yet.
Yeah, but certainly in Agamemnon's case, he didn't even die in the Trojan War.
Yes, so there you go.
There's definitely some.
Is this show not
inconsistencies.
historically accurate?
Not
It might not be.
historically accurate.
That's the charm, though.
Rather than summoning Achilles, Agamemnon,
Or Hector.
and Hector, she summons the 3 men whom Ares himself murdered from the village. And those villagers walk out of the funeral hut where presumably their bodies
They
Terror.
should be more scared.
Everybody should freak out.
A little bit
because
more scared.
these dead guys just emerged.
But I mean, of course you'd be happy, but I think they should have been a little bit more perturbed.
And the dead guys are like, yeah, this lady saved us against this hooded figure.
Yeah,
And
they
so
clear her
she
name.
Clear her name.
I found this entire turn of events really cynical as a storytelling choice.
Interesting.
Going into this
explain.
episode, I thought for sure Xena would eventually be able to prove to the villagers that someone else did this murder, that she would be able to use the system to prove her innocence. And I think it's quite telling, maybe, of Xena's worldview about the institution of justice, that rather than do that, Xena's like, I'm going to find a loophole and, bring these men back to life, because I literally cannot be found not guilty. There is literally no way for me to make my case, even though I'm innocent. So rather than do that, I'm just going to, leap over that entire system and bring these dudes back to life. And again, that's really interesting.
That's a good point.
So often when people talk about justice, they say, well, it can't bring the victims back to life.
Yeah.
And Xena's like, all right, well, I'm going to just bring the victims back to life. Because these villagers will not find her innocent. It just cannot happen. And that's partially because Ares has rigged the system. But you feel like that speaks to some deeper cynicism about what happens when men put someone on trial who they really want to find guilty.
Yeah.
I thought this was mirrored by the shots at the end here where you do the same extreme close-up on her face and on Ares as you did when, they were going to hang her. The same shot selection is here in Victory as in Execution.
The
scene.
battle of wills, but here Xena's on top.
Good episode overall, I thought.
Yeah.
Both of these were pretty great.
good.
Now, we have to talk about the very end.
Of
where
course.
Gabrielle
The
gets her
paybacks.
own justice.
Yes, she punches Xena right in her arm gauntlet, and it hurts.
Why would you punch her in the gauntlet?
I don't know. But I love how she says paybacks.
Yeah.
This is for
it's
paybacks.
for paybacks. And Xena asks her, did it feel good? And she's like, oh, it hurt. But yeah, it also felt good.
It was really cute.
Which is kind of what justice is like.
But again,
it hurts, it feels good.
Yeah, it's true.
deep. It's deep.
It's
But
deep.
it's also a little bit of their, it's so important that in that moment, Xena's like, it meant so much to me that you came back after I had done this horrible thing.
That's
to
true. We
you.
didn't even talk about that scene.
We did.
that Gabrielle comes to the prison after being hit and is
Right.
trying to
Oh, we-
bust her out of jail. And Xena is so touched that Gabrielle has returned. Xena really thinks that she has sent Gabrielle away forever.
Yeah.
That this is the end of their friendship.
No.
And Gabrielle, of course.
Sweet.
Yeah.
OTP.
No, but and it's
Is
just
loyal.
it's Gabrielle trusts her, and you had said earlier that how right is Gabrielle in the sense that Gabrielle does not think that anything that bad Xena does is Xena, and we want to believe that, but you do kind of want to question how much of that is true and how much of that isn't. But it's always important that Gabrielle is that person who is like, this isn't you, and I trust you, and you didn't mean to hurt me.
Gabrielle's Xena's better angel.
Yeah.
And, Xena on some level needs to believe that isn't her. Because that's part of really not being that person anymore, is understanding that you're not that.
I have a note here that says, Xena's soft lipstick good.
Yes.
Did you guys feel this way?
Very not always soft
end
lipstick
note.
is good.
I thought her
is-
lipstick was great in this one, and it's just gonna get worse.
Yeah. Well, it's
Later on.
it's the 90s had that dark lipstick. It was super in. but soft is nice. It is nice. It's always nice.
Is it because, this is sort of an episode where Xena is vulnerable? So they were like,
I
let's
think so.
express
They
it.
do a lot of soft lip
Yeah.
syncs. I noticed whenever she's like sexy or in kind of like temptation mode of various sorts.
She's not being a warrior. She
Yeah.
doesn't have her armor on, and she shouldn't have her purple lipstick.
I do know that we like to make fun of some funny hats and stuff, but it is like that kind of attention to makeup in those moments and costuming where, you have her just in her shift for part of it. Like, it's all very intentional, and it adds to her vulnerability, I think, in these moments. So as much as I make fun of old funny hats, like props to that kind of stuff, because that goes a long way for character.
Yeah, you feel that the episode is very aware of the ways in which costume and makeup tell the story, even if they're very dated costumes and makeup.
We love these episodes.
Yeah,
I
they're
think.
great.
Yeah, I think they're a high point, at least from where I'm sitting in season 1 of Xena. They're really telling important pieces of the story and telling them well.
Okay, so I think we're wrapped up here.
Yeah, follow us on Twitter at Xena Warrior Pod. We're on iTunes, so you can subscribe there, download episodes, and like it and leave reviews, which are always welcome. You can follow us on Tumblr, Xena Warrior Podcast, and we are on also many other places where you can listen to podcasts: Google Play, Stitcher, all those fun places. So whatever you like best, go find us there.
The power.
The passion.
The podcast.
Woo!